You're listening to Slutty Society, a podcast exploring sex, sexuality, and all things in between.
Hey, yo, man, you really don't have to be out here like this broadcasting all your fucking porno shit.
Hey loves, what's up? I'm your host, Sheila J, and I am here to explore sex, sexuality, and all things in between. Thanks for being here to listen. It's been a pretty busy last few days for me, and I just want to get this episode done and posted. I'm currently in my home office with the door shut. Hopefully, I can get this episode recorded without any background noise or sounds. I forgot I had a cleaning service scheduled for today. You know, I am actually someone who enjoys cleaning. It helps me decompress, but I like to hire a service from time to time because sometimes I am fucking exhausted and I can't enjoy my home if stuff isn't clean, if shit isn't in place. I am OCD about that, almost in a serial killer type of way. I also need it to smell good. I'm always burning candles. I stay stocked up on air freshener plugins. Every type of home smell good item you could think of, I probably have 10 extra of each. The funny thing is, I rarely have people over. I am very protective of my space and the energy I allow in it. So I guess I keep my home nice for myself, but that's okay. Anyways, this is a feedback episode. The format will be a little different, and I'm going over feedback for 3 episodes. I know a couple of the episodes were a minute ago, but I want to show appreciation to those people who took the time to comment or answer my episode questions. I appreciate it, and it's my fault my ass is behind on this. I also have a few random comments, questions, and some listener sex stories to share towards the end of the episode. So before I get into that, I want to acknowledge some new countries my podcast has reached over the last few months. Clearly, you all love inconsistency and a phone sex voice that's fit for a sailor. I want to announce these countries with my medieval announcement sound. I recently watched the season 2 trailer for Game of Thrones House of Dragon. Can't wait for that shit, but it made me download a bunch of medieval sounds for the podcast. So here we go. Over the last few months, I've gained listeners from Belgium, the Netherlands, Ireland, Kenya, bang motherfucking Ladesh, and the newest country to join, Greece. Welcome to my kingdom. Sometimes it's a dirty, filthy place, but I like to think I'm insightful. Glad to have you all. All right, let's get into this feedback. The episode I'm going to start with is titled A Teaspoon a Day. Now, I had a couple of replies to the question I presented in this episode, and that question was, do you have an uncommon request when you're receiving oral sex? If so, what is it? Danielle from Oakland responded, and I want to say thanks, Danielle, for your support, for your interaction, because you've replied to several episode questions and you're always leaving comments. So again, thank you. It's definitely appreciated. So Danielle says, I don't have an uncommon request when receiving oral, but in my pre-married life, I dated someone who had an uncommon request. He would stop me mid-blowjob, and I mean, when I was really in the thick of it, he would stop me to look him in the eyes and beg for it back in my mouth. While I don't think a little bit of begging is odd, he'd want me to beg for it for several minutes, which killed the mood. It became a drawn-out act. I feel you, Danielle, because it's kind of like, do you want your dick sucked or not? But I definitely can see how that might take, I suppose, the fun out of it. And as you said, a little bit of begging isn't odd at all. I'll tell you, I once had someone ask me to crawl across the floor before sucking their dick, like to crawl to them. And sure, I did it. Now, I'm not going to be pouncing around like a fucking cat on a regular basis, but in this particular situation, we were in the middle of some really wild sex, both super turned on. We just had this crazy sexual connection. And I think sometimes when you're super turned on like that, when the sexual connection is on 10 or above, you'll do all types of shit. Maybe shit you wouldn't do with everyone. Maybe shit you never imagined yourself doing. It's just like that sometimes. But maybe in your example with the situation you shared, it sounds like he was into it more than you. So I get it. Okay, next one. Larry V says, I enjoy rubbing my dick on someone's face when receiving oral. Okay, Larry, is that really uncommon? Come on. I feel like a dick rubbing against your face is a rite of passage when sucking a dick. Like, oops, I poked you in the cheek, or uh-oh, I accidentally missed the large hole in your face somehow. But all right, next. Jules85 reached out. Jules says, when I am eaten out, I like to have a butt plug inserted for the majority of the time. I usually want it put in at the beginning and kept in until I come. And if we have sex afterwards, I want the butt plug to stay in during that. Well, okay, Jules, a woman who knows what she likes, I'm not mad at it. You know, I used to dabble in anal plugs. I haven't used one in a long time, but there was one relationship I was in where we incorporated a lot of sex toys. The guy I was with was super cool about using them on me. We would go to the adult store together, pick stuff out together. We got some anal plugs for me. For anyone that doesn't know, there are a variety of sizes, but we just got the smaller ones, nothing too crazy. I know they're also used to prepare yourself before anal sex to kind of stretch it out back there. I haven't used it in that capacity, but I'm more of the mindset that let's just get that dick in there if we're going to decide to do anal. I don't want to set up for it. I don't want to have to remove one object from my ass and then replace it with another directly afterwards. That anticipation of those steps would give me anxiety. All right. But outside of the responses for the episode question, I did receive a few comments to this episode. First comment is from someone who goes by, it's the donuts for me. All right. But it's the donuts for me says, I 100% understand when you stated you have a sensitive clit. I'm in the same boat and have had trouble having an orgasm from stimulation there from oral sex or from someone touching it. In my experience, men have been too aggressive. Maybe a better phrasing is they've applied too much pressure. Sometimes I speak up, sometimes I don't, because I've had times where people didn't listen when I did, or it seemed like they were irritated if I expressed what felt good to me. So to this, I would say, first off, I think we all do a disservice to ourselves when we don't speak up about what we like sexually with a partner. I think because of the shame society has placed on actually having, healthy conversations about sex, it can be hard to express your needs. So I get it. I've been there in the past. I've been with people who gave no fuck about what I needed from sex and gave no fuck when I expressed it. But I learned it's important to let people know. And if they aren't receptive to you, then you probably shouldn't have sex with them in the first place, especially if it's going to be a one-sided situation. Now, I think I've said this on an episode before, but we all are individuals and like different things when it comes to sex, or different things turn us on, get us off, right? Everyone's body isn't the same, and we can't treat every sexual partner the same. So how you, and I'm speaking in general, not saying you, the person who wrote in, but how you give oral to one person may not work for the next. I think it's important to ask people how they like things done before you jump right in and assume you're an expert. Also, our bodies can change, wants and needs may change, and if you're someone who is in a long-term situation, whatever type of relationship that might be, you have to continue to have conversations about what you want when it comes to sex. People aren't going to magically read your mind. Okay, next up we have Omar who says, I love this segment, the more shit you know. I almost fell out of my chair listening to the episode with the bizarre semen facts. Thanks, Omar. That segment is actually my favorite too because the shit I find out is so interesting and random. I love to learn new things, and with each episode, when I'm putting together that segment, I think the random sex facts can't get any more ridiculous until I start working on the next episode and I'm like, what the fuck? But yeah, I think I'll continue to do that segment for a while. Glad to hear someone is enjoying it. All right, last one for the episode, a teaspoon a day, and it's a question. So in this episode, I believe I told 2 personal sex stories at the end of the episode, and one I called Whole Foods. I talked about how I once met this woman at Whole Foods. Fast forward to us hanging out for some time, and eventually her and her husband asked me to have a threesome.
Your skill is extraordinary. And I was going to ask you to join us.
So the question, or I guess questions, are regarding that. And this is Omar again. So he's asking, or he asked, what happened? Did it go south? Did it get awkward? Can you talk more about your experience when it comes to threesomes? So I guess I'll answer those questions in order. It did get awkward, yes, but not in the way you think. I actually continued to hang out with this couple for a bit. We had some more threesomes, and then it got awkward because they would argue in front of me about other stuff they had going on in their relationship. It felt weird because I was there for the fun times. I was there to fuck. We're not a throuple. I'm not in a relationship with them. And I have nothing against people who are poly or who, have multiple partners and all of that stuff. But in this situation, that was not the case. And both of them would also individually text me complaining about the other person. So I had to set some boundaries, and I asked them to communicate, or that we all communicate in a group text. I just don't like drama. I don't like to be a part of any negativity. I talked to them about keeping me out of their personal issues. I requested that group text. It worked for a little bit. The same shit started happening again, and I had to remove myself, but it was fun while it lasted, for sure. As for my thoughts on threesomes, I think if you're into that or interested in that, there needs to be a conversation with everyone involved together about boundaries, preferences during sex, all of that shit. You need to talk it out. I think without doing that, it might get awkward outside of the threesome or during the threesome, which is extra awkward. Experience-wise, I've had a few threesomes, mainly 1 man, 2 women, but I've also had 1 threesome with all women. It was pretty nice. But I'll tell you a quick story about my very first threesome. So I was in my early 20s. I was out with one of my friends at a nightclub, and I remember her asking me if I was into threesomes that night, but it really didn't click until later on. So after going out, we go downtown to this loft of this guy she knows. It's super late. I was pretty tired. I remember us all laying in his bed. He had a really large bed, and we're watching TV, but I'm kind of also half asleep. But at some point, we end up cuddling and kissing. Clothes were removed, and we had sex. We had a threesome. Now, a couple of embarrassing, awkward things took place. 1, I had no intentions of having sex this night, let alone a full-blown threesome. I was getting over someone else and not initially in the best spirits, so I hadn't gotten my vagina waxed, I'll be honest. It had been a minute. I generally don't like hair down there, so I had my first threesome with a bush, just like I was in a 70s porno. I felt kind of weird about it, but the threesome went on. The other thing that happened is my friend went right to sleep afterwards. I want to say she had to work early in the morning or something. I just know she had to get up early. So she goes to sleep, and the guy and me end up having sex again. And I kind of sort of forgot she was there. So seriously, this bed was huge. But I did a quick pause and asked if we could move to another room to finish fucking again. The next day, her and I had a conversation about it, and I think I asked her if it was cool if I continued to have sex with this dude. No shame at all, but she was fine with it, and I think she ended up getting back with her ex not too long after that anyways. But yeah, him and I fucked for several months until I eventually met someone who I was into, not just physically, but mentally as well. Good times, good memories, but all right, going into the next episode titled And Your Sister Too. I basically talked a little bit about my experience being bisexual on this episode, and the question I asked was, is there anything you want to know about being bisexual or anything I talked about in this episode? I'll inform you, I did get a couple of not so nice slut shaming and anti-gay responses to this question. I opened these messages and shook my fucking head.
Well. The most diabolical haters this side of the Mississippi.
Oh man, they aren't worth reading. Honestly, I am at a place in life that I find it funny when people are that bothered by my sexuality. The fact that you wasted your time, wasted your energy to reach out to me lets me know that you probably don't have a lot of positive things going on. There's so much bad, so much negativity in the world, and I choose to fill my days with stuff that makes me happy, stuff that brings me joy. I don't go out of my fucking way to do things to add on to the bad or to add on to the negative shit. But I get it. There are people that love to hate. It consumes them. But just know, if you're listening, your hate isn't going to consume me. I have worked too fucking hard for the happiness that I have, for the joy that I carry today. No one is going to take that from me, but thank you for making me feel important enough for you to write in. All right. I did get another response to this question. My number one fan, Danielle from Oakland, says, what are some pros and cons for being in a relationship with a woman versus a man? So in this episode, I did talk about not having a preference when it comes to being with a man or a woman. For me, it's more about the person. I can be attracted to either. And in reference to your question, my answer is similar. For me, and I'm speaking on myself personally, I like to say I am not the bisexual ambassador, but I don't like to speak on pros and cons for either. I've had pros with women, pros with men, cons with women, cons with men. Again, it's really about the individual person. The only thing I'll say is when dating women, there's less concern about gender roles society normally places on heterosexual relationships. There's less pressure in that aspect. But again, each situation, each person is going to have its own pros and cons, pluses and minuses. All right, I have a comment for this episode from Valon 8119. I think that's how you pronounce it. So Valam says, thank you for being this open about being bisexual. People are always confused by us. I hate constantly explaining myself. It's exhausting. Thank you for sharing what your experience in different parts of your life has been. I relate. I truly appreciate that. It's definitely been an interesting journey for me. I can also relate to that fatigue of feeling as if you need to explain yourself, or I'm guessing you mean explain your bisexuality. I think in society, being bisexual has been viewed as a trend, as a phase, or that if you're bisexual, you're confused. So ultimately, that perspective is being bisexual isn't real. And I think that's where the constant questioning stems from. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the episode called Plan B and A Bruise Me. In this episode, I talked about different stuff that can go wrong during sex. So accidents, injuries, mishaps, all of that shit. The question I asked in this episode was, what is the craziest sex injury or mishap you've experienced? I received several responses to this, so I'm kind of just going to run through them. First one, nibbling on a nipple and accidentally biting it, breaking the skin and drawing blood.
What? Oh no!
Falling off of the bed during sex and ending up in the ER with a back injury. Accidentally kicking a dude in his eye when he was on top of me and tried to push my legs up to my shoulders. A condom getting stuck in my vagina. Definitely been there. A black eye from my face in the headboard. Peeing on myself in bed while I was drunk. Okay, so my question to that one is, did you pee on yourself before or after or during the sex? Because I'm a little confused. And then the last one is throwing up on a dick when giving head. All right, I can relate to that last one. Quick story, I was on a trip with someone in Vegas. I had been drinking champagne all day, barely had food, and we go back to the room. It's time for some sex-related activities. So I'm giving him head, and his dick hit the wrong spot in the back of my throat. Next thing I know, an unexpected champagne shower is coming from my mouth, just straight liquid and bubbles. It was embarrassing as fuck. But you know what? We did a quick reset and ended up accomplishing the task at hand, so everything was okay. But thank you everyone who wrote in for that question. I definitely do need some more details regarding the peeing in bed though. All right, comments for this episode. Drew says, when I heard you play the clip of Dennis Rodman telling the story about how he broke his dick, it made me laugh. I also heard Dennis Rodman tell this story on a show on Viceland a few years ago. It seems to be a story he is proud of since he continues to tell it. Yeah, if you Google Dennis Rodman broken penis, so many different interviews and videos come up about that. Next, Roland K34 says, I think I now have arachnophobia after you shared the story about the Brazilian wandering spider causing long-term painful erections. Shit sounds horrible, but I want to share an article about how they might use the venom for erectile dysfunction. So Roland attached this article to the email he sent me, and I won't read the entire article he sent, but it's from a website called Live Science, and it states, scientists say a synthetic compound derived from Brazilian wandering spider venom could treat people with erectile dysfunction for whom drugs like Viagra don't work. So the article's from September of this year, and it talks about how the venom holds the key to more inclusive treatments for erectile dysfunction, and this research is being done in Brazil. So they're testing a new drug from the Brazilian wandering spider, also called the banana spider, since it's accidentally exported on banana shipments. It's the most toxic species of spiders in the world. It goes on to talk about the symptoms of the bite, which I talked about all of that on the episode. Now, it's saying that they're looking to make an alternative drug outside of Viagra and Cialis because those two treatments don't work for all patients, and they pose risks for people who are already taking nitrates, which are often prescribed for chest pains. The combination can cause a dangerous drop in blood pressure. The researchers are also in the second phase of the trial. The treatment must pass a third phase and a final phase of testing before it can be approved for medicine. All right, cool. Thank you for sending this, Roland. Great follow-up to that story. Now, I received 2 questions for this episode. The first one is from Amber, and Amber wants to know, how are things with Turkish Bay? You know, unfortunately, I had to put an end to things with Turkish Bay. Super nice guy, but I think he wanted to move a little faster than meets my comfort level. 1 minute, we're just getting to know each other, no pressure, it's easy, it's cool. And the next thing you know, certain actions just made me feel like I was in a full-blown relationship, but we hadn't had a conversation about that or taking that next step or what that would look like. I also think it's hard for a lot of people to understand that I'm a free spirit on top of being an introvert. I get a lot of fulfillment from me time. So while I sometimes enjoy being around people, I can easily feel suffocated. It's definitely a fine balance. But I wish him the best. We're cool, no bad blood there. Okay, last question comes from Jason E. Jason says, who designed your website? I briefly looked at your website and your Instagram, and I like the graphics. Thanks. I know I haven't done much as far as content with them, but I did put together my own website and I do my own graphics. I grew up pretty spoiled. So my dad bought me my first computer when I was in the first grade. I don't think that's too uncommon in this day. Most kids are pretty tech savvy early on. But I think in the 90s, having your own computer, having a computer in your bedroom would have been a bigger deal. And my dad always made sure I had the latest computer, so I was constantly getting new ones. I taught myself pretty young how to build a website, how to code, how to use my computer to draw, because I used to do a lot of art as well. And I would spend hours learning and studying different types of computer shit. But I appreciate that compliment. That makes me feel great. All right, I want to start wrapping this episode up. But before I go, I want to tell you some stories. All right, the first story is from a listener who would like to remain anonymous, and they titled their story, Burning to Come. At one point, I went almost a year without sex. I was burned out from dating and decided I would keep my peace by self-pleasuring only. One night, I was at a gathering with friends and met a new guy. When he introduced himself to me, I was instantly attracted to him, and my pussy had butterflies. I knew in that moment that my pause from sex wouldn't last much longer. We exchanged numbers and ended up going out together a couple of times. A few weeks after we met, he invited me over to his place for dinner. I had no doubt that we were going to fuck. I went all out on beauty treatments that day. Hair, nails, eyebrows, eyelashes, had my legs and my pussy waxed. I sprayed my favorite perfume in all the best places on my body and put on a brand new fuck me dress. I get to his place, he opens the door, and by the look on his face, I knew we were on the same page. I could have fucked him right then and there, but the food he was cooking smelled so good, I thought I would be polite and eat first. We sat down, ate some traditional Haitian food. I was impressed. It was good. Some of the dishes were very spicy. After we finished dinner, he told me he could not stop looking at my thighs and said he was hungry for something else. He picks me up and carries me to his bed. He pushes my dress up, goes to pull my panties down, and laughs. I wasn't wearing any. Surprise. He begins eating my pussy like I was a dessert. I'm losing my mind, pulling on the covers. This was the best feeling getting back into the sex game until my pussy started to tingle and a strange sensation took over, and then it burned. I tried not to panic. My mind was racing about what could have been happening. Then I realized it was probably something in the food. I wanted to come from his tongue so bad that I tolerated the pain and let it happen. When I finished, I immediately jumped up like a crazy person, ran to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my pussy over and over. Embarrassing as hell. The next story is from a listener who goes by EJ, and he titled his story, The Voicemail. A few years ago, my then girlfriend, now wife, came over to my place to stay the night. We both were and still are into roleplay. On that night, we decided to roleplay as me being a good guy and her being a bad influence. This roleplay was fun, it was sexy. She yelled at me to shut the fuck up and listen a few times. She also demanded me to do many bad things to her. The day after, I was at work sitting at my desk, and one of my coworkers approached me and joked about how I really like to be told what to do. I was confused at first until he hands me his phone, tells me to hold it up to my ear and listen. My heart dropped as I heard me and my then girlfriend, now wife, having sex during roleplay on a voicemail on my coworker's phone. My phone must have been on the bed when we were having sex, and I must have accidentally dialed his number. Luckily, this was a coworker I was friends with, and thankfully, I didn't accidentally leave this voicemail for my boss. Okay, loves, it's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to send feedback on future episodes, I'll put that info on the show notes. You can also listen to future episodes or old episodes on most podcast streaming platforms by searching Slutty Society Podcast. I appreciate you all. Bye, loves.